Hey guys, it's been a long time since I've done a vlog, so here we go. I've got a couple of questions for you that I think can really help you step up your practice game and, more importantly, your learning game, regardless of what you're trying to learn. So the questions are, let me have a seat. Question number 1. What should one think about when practicing? Question number 2. How do you know how to practice? Question number 3. How do you know if you're progressing or if you're just, not? And question number 4. How does one get better? Okay, so these are all as vague questions as they can be. These are abstract, almost philosophical questions that mostly everyone struggles to answer. And don't take my answer as the ultimate truth. This is just a way to somehow organize your thinking behind your learning. I will have to talk about 2 things during this video. 1, the concept of metacognition, and 2, the pyramid of mastery. Now, if you've seen the title of this video, you know that that's going to be the main topic, but let me just share some thoughts on metacognition. Metacognition, by definition, is the idea of thinking about thinking. I'll say that again. Thinking about thinking. Reflecting about reflection. Introspecting about introspection. Okay, you get the point. Without sounding too weird and esoteric, what I'm talking about here is pretty straightforward. What do you think about when you think? How do you vocalize, in your head of course, your thoughts? How do you organize them? How do you pay attention to them? Which ones do you choose to dismiss? And which thoughts do you decide to pay attention to and act on? When it comes to practicing a musical instrument, this is especially beneficial to do. It's very important that whilst you're practicing, you're asking yourself questions. That's the only way that you can effectively and efficiently keep track of your progress, and that way always get better. Let's have a look. Okay, so let's say that I have to learn that drum beat. I see the notes. Let's give it a go. As most of you, I too lose track of what I'm supposed to be doing. The reason for why that happens is because I didn't quite understand the exercise in the first place. Most of us go about practicing with a ton of assumptions instead of certainty. Here's how you solve that problem. Okay, that is the pyramid of mastery. What you're looking at is exactly how I organize my learning process and, of course, my teaching process as well. Let me break it down for you. Okay, so as you can see, there's 3 phases to this. At the bottom, you've got understanding. This is effectively when you spend some time asking questions, clarifying if you do understand the exercise, and just doing the overall understanding. It's pretty self-explanatory. But maybe not, and I'm gonna show you exactly what to do there. But before I show you that, let me talk about the second phase, knowledge. I call this knowledge because effectively That's when you get to know the exercise. In other words, that's when you start practicing. That's when you start playing the exercise. Of course, always basing yourself on what you've understood. In other words, now that you know what to do what you know. Knowledge. As you can also tell, that's the chunkiest chunk of the pyramid. That's because that's the one that's going to take the longest, and it's going to be hard work, it's going to be difficult, but at the end, you reach application. That's not a reward, that's still practice. That's when you practice how to use what you've learned. You apply that idea as a drum fill, as a drum beat, you play music, you use that with your band, etc., etc. Application. Now let me also talk about exactly how you can keep track of each one of those phases, and more importantly, how you know that you are ready to level up. First, where do we start? What's the mindset we start with? Okay, right here at the beginning, that's when you start the learning process. There, you should adopt the mindset of ignorance. And why is that? Because you are not supposed to start learning something by knowing what that something is. In other words, you can't know what you don't know. To do the opposite would be to assume that you know something that you don't know. And that, my friends, is called delusion. Don't start there. Once you've understood the exercise, you will not know it yet, but you'll be aware of how it goes. So you reach awareness. Now you are ready to enter the knowledge phase. You practice. Once you peak, then you have achieved two things: competence and memorization. Now, very important, you can have it memorized and not be competent. It's very easy to learn mistakes, so make sure you have these two before you move on to application. Now you start applying the concept. If you are successful at applying this concept, what you will achieve is freedom. You will be free to then use that exercise however you want. Now let's get something straight. This takes time. Maybe understanding takes 30 seconds, maybe 5 minutes. But the knowledge phase, that can take up to 6 months. The application, a year. Who knows? It takes time. It doesn't really matter how long it takes, as long as you can keep track of your progress. Now let's quickly talk about the 5 levels of understanding. In other words, what kind of questions should you be asking to make sure that you've understood the exercise? Okay, so now you want to start by understanding an exercise. What should you ask? If you are a drummer, then I would suggest that you ask yourself 5 questions. The first one, what's the rhythm? What's the subdivision? What's the pattern? In other words, in a very simple way, what are the notes and when are you supposed to play them? Number 2, what's the sticking? That doesn't only apply for rudiments, that also applies for drum beats. Make sure you know what each limb should be doing. Number 3, what are the dynamics? In other words, what's the volume of each note? Which notes are you supposed to emphasize? Which notes are you supposed to hide? Number 4, what's the orchestration? Which sound sources are you using? Finally, number 5, what are the mechanics? What are the movements that you're supposed to be using? Is it an upstroke on beat 2? Is it a downstroke, full stroke? Are we supposed to be using the molar, rebound, buzz strokes, flams? Mechanics. Super important to know the answer to that before you start practicing. Otherwise, you might end up memorizing the wrong thing. So, what are you supposed to do? Ask yourself those 5 questions, and by the way, change those questions however you want, depending on what you're learning. But do come up with 5 at least questions that you answer before you even start practicing. You have to be aware of these answers as you're practicing as well. So during the knowledge phase, never forget what you've understood. Don't allow the playing, the doing, to affect what you're supposed to be doing. And by the way, it might sound silly, but that's where most people get it wrong. It's once they start doing it. Because your brain will want to go get and recall information that is more familiar than the one you're trying to learn. In other words, your memory will betray your logical thinking. So what you know you're supposed to be doing is not necessarily what you will end up doing if you're not aware. So there you go, guys. That's the pyramid of mastery. I suggest that you start organizing your practice in order to achieve mastery, not just to, memorize something that you don't really know even how to use. If you are a music teacher watching this, you know that your students only use like 1% of what they know. And yes, they do know those things because not only you taught them those ideas, you've seen them playing them. And yet, when they just jam, they never show up, those ideas. So that disconnection comes from not knowing that learning doesn't stop at memorization. Learning stops when you've achieved freedom. The freedom that you will feel when you can use what you know, whenever you want, however you want, in all contexts, styles, genres, etc., etc. Freedom, right?
Ryan Little.